Hi everybody, my name's Isaac Howarth and I'm head teacher at Queen Eleanor Primary Academy in the Far Cotton neighborhood of Northampton. And I'm just going to talk to you today about sparking curiosity using Northampton's cultural heritage. So finding the kind of spectacular in the things around us every day. Heather Fern in 2019 gave an absolutely brilliant keynote speech at the Historical Association conference. And in it, she brought up this thread from Solomon Kingsnorth, who talked about how historical knowledge can give you a completely different sense of place. So he talked about two people seeing the same church and they look up and they see completely different things. So one person looks up and goes, huh, big church, nice church. Looks like other churches I've seen. Yeah, what time's lunch? Another person looks at it and they see a Gothic church that's different to Baroque cathedrals. They can imagine its history. They can imagine where it sits in time. And then they get in touch with the past. They see a church that's existed on this site from before the cathedral was built, and all because they have that really rich historical knowledge that gives them a really strong sense of place. And that's what I'm going to talk about and how we do it in Northampton. So at Queen Eleanor, we talk about four broad areas in our curriculum framework that we'd like to develop. We'd like to develop powerful knowledge, justice, healthy relationships, creativity, and performance. And this is going to focus largely on powerful knowledge. And we use the phrase liberation from insularity, which comes from the Key Stage 2 aims for foreign languages. And I thought it was just such a great phrase that once you've got that knowledge, it expands your horizon so much. Healthy relationships, because having that pride in your place makes you an engaged citizen. And justice, because in justice, people interrogate the world and ask, why are things the way they are? What are the knock-on effects of something? Why could they have been different? And this is something that also happens quite frequently in history. So I've made this little framework to help us look again at what we see every day. So you start at a really basic level saying, hey, what's that? And then you question it and you go, never noticed that before. You're looking at you're looking in the detail and you say, what is it doing there? And in terms of cognitive science, it's kind of like finding a concrete example. And then when you say, what is it doing there? You're elaborating on that explanation. And then you ask yourself, well, how does this fit into a wider picture? What other history does it intersect with? And that's making links. And these are all ideas that I've taken out of Megan Sumeraki and Jana Weinstein's book, Understanding How We Learn, which, if you're interested more in the cognitive principles, is definitely something worth diving into. So we're going to look at three examples, Eleanor Cross, St. Sapps Church in Northampton, and All Saints Church in Northampton. So pick the Eleanor Cross because it's actually quite near one of them is quite near to our school. And there were a series of stone monuments put up to commemorate a queen and along her journey after she had died back to London. So the one near us actually looks different. So this is the Eleanor Cross in Geddington. This is the Eleanor Cross in Hardingstone, which is the one near us. And this is the Eleanor Cross in Waltham, these are the only three surviving ones. And this is a print in our school of the Hardingstone Cross. And there's lots of questions that you can start to ask about them. You can start to ask, why do they look different? And I first started with, actually, what is this? I found this chunk of rock in my office when I first started at Queen Eleanor in September. And I thought it was kind of cool, it's a 700-year-old rock. And then I asked, well, why are the Eleanor crosses all slightly different? What does that tell me about the masons who actually carved them? And why were they placed there? I mean, we know that it's where Queen Eleanor's body rested on the way back to London. However, why specifically there? Why not a bit further off? And it turns out that it has to do with traffic routes in the Middle Ages, where they were in areas where people would be expected to kind of stop and offer prayers for the soul. So it tells you something about traffic patterns and travel in medieval life. It tells you about the role of religion in medieval life. So there's actually a lot packed in to something that we see every day. Now, when you look at Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Northampton, sometimes called St. Sapps, again, it's tucked behind an office building. You might not think much of it, but it's got a few quirks that, again, like it's a round church, that kind of stand out. But when you dive into the history, you realize that actually this is a really significant thing right here in our own area. So what else can I see when I look at St. Sapps? Well, you start off, it's on Sheep Street, it's behind an office building. Bit more historical knowledge, it was built by Simon de Senlis in the 12th century after he returned from Crusade. It was likely inspired by a Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. And then you go a bit broader, and it's like, well, it's a round church, but it's only one of 4 round churches that survive in England. And quite oddly, it's not a Templar church. Very often people associate round churches with Templar churches. And in terms of church architecture, being inspired by the Church of the Holy Sepulchre from Jerusalem, it's built on a similar template to Charlemagne's Aachen Cathedral, again, built on the template of Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. So it belongs to this wider European family of churches. And again, it's all right here in our backyard. You can also look at All Saints Church in Northampton. It looks a bit more modern church from the 17th century, but it also gives us a great counterpoint to talking about things like the history of the Great Fire of London. Just bear with me and I'll kind of explain how. So when I look at All Saints, what else can I see? So I look up at All Saints there. I see it all the time when I pass it in the town center. I know it was rebuilt in 1675 after the Great Fire of Northampton, consecrated in 1680. Charles II donated 1,000 tons of timber for the rebuilding. It was modeled after Wren's churches after the Great Fire of London in 1666. So you can see that St. Paul's Cathedral, there's a bit of a similarity. But then when you look at the architecture, you can see the classical inspiration for the columns. And you know that then this is coming at a time of a revival of ancient Greek influence in architecture, again, putting it in a broader historical context. So there's definite imprints of the past on this. So it's not just an interesting building on its own, but it's the network of ideas it fits into. So my takeaway message is this. Walk slower and look up. See what's around you and question why is it there. Look at the detail and see how has the detail changed over time. When you look at things like they look mismatched, that's evidence of historical change. Why is it there? And then ask, what's the bigger story? What other stories crop up in the history of this building, in the history of this person, in the history of this location? Because it can really make you look at the world differently. So this is a medieval map of Northampton with its walls, and this is a modern map of Northampton. And you can see there's the city wall, and you can see the remains of the city wall still in the street plan. You can see large boulevard through the middle, and again, you can still see the presence of those large boulevards through the middle. So there's definitely a medieval footprint in modern Northampton. And then what that allows, when you've got this mental framework, what it allows you to do is see the past in the present, so that this idea of, these medieval cities have a very common kind of pattern. So when I look at Cambridge or Canterbury, Carcassonne in France, Kortrijk in Belgium, I can see that similar medieval walled layout still in the street pattern. And I can appreciate my Northampton heritage, and I can take pride in my local history when I dive into the present through the past. There are a few more resources there if anyone's interested to know a bit more. And beyond that, thank you very much for letting me talk to you today about our local history and how we can inspire curiosity by looking at familiar things differently.